when you do things that maybe you didn't believe were possible, when you learn something that helps you understand yourself at a deeper level, I think you can start to value yourself internally at the appropriate level. And I think it takes self-awareness, which is going to take learning.
Welcome to Your Intended Message, the perfect place for leaders and promising professionals who want to convey the intended message for greater success. Every week, we interview experts who address the challenges and best practices to deliver your message effectively. That might be one-to-one, one-to-few, or one-to-many. And perhaps the most important conversation, one-to-self. I'm your host, George Torok. My guest today is Kevin Palmieri. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about Kevin. 1, he is the CFO, founder, and co-host of Next Level University, a global top 100 self-improvement podcast with more than 1,000 episodes, reaching over I'm jealous, 500,000 people in more than 125 countries. 2, after overcoming depression and suicidal ideation, which means that he was thinking of creative ways to kill himself, didn't want to do it in a boring way, Kevin became passionate about self-improvement and entrepreneurship. And through his podcasting and speaking, he made it his life's purpose to make a positive impact on as many people as possible. And 3, he believes in a heart-driven and no BS approach to holistic self-improvement and teaching others how to get to the next level of their lives. Kevin Palmieri, welcome to Your Intended Message.
George, thank you so very much for having me on. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I would expect nothing less from you and Your Intended Message. Thank you again for having me.
Kevin, I'm glad I'm living up to your expectations already, surpassing even.
Crushing them.
Kevin, the next level, what do you mean by that when you say that people need to get to the next level? What is that? And is that a goal, final goal, or is it a stepping stone?
I think it's a never-ending goal. No matter where you are, there is always somewhere more that you could go. There is always a little bit more that you could be doing. There is a deeper level that you can understand yourself. So all the next level really is a continuation of progress for you in whatever arena you're looking into for the rest of your life. I believe you'll hear people say, George, that I'm an educated person. And I believe that education never ends. You can be a lifelong learner, and I guarantee your results will reflect that if you do that for the length of your life.
So Next Level suggests that we are a continuous work in progress.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. I think that some of us, when you build a house, you don't just build a house and then leave it. You have to clean the house. You have to maintain the house. You have to keep up with the times. Maybe you have to change your wiring when the electrical codes change. There's always something going on. So by definition, nothing ever stays the same. If something is quote unquote in maintenance mode, it's probably getting worse. And I'm not saying that as a human intrinsically you're getting worse, but if you're not creating new skills, if you're not becoming a better communicator, if you're not honing your leadership skills, you're probably losing ground and you're losing momentum and you're not going to get the opportunities and the impact that you want out of life. It's a never-ending game.
And so for those who think, well, I got my education, I don't need to know anything more. What do you say to those people?
If you have goals for better, you will need to know more ultimately. And I think a lot of us convince ourselves that we don't have goals. And maybe it can come from a lot of things. Maybe you don't believe in yourself. Maybe you don't think it'll be worth it. But if you want more out of life than you currently have, you most likely will need to level up somewhere. One of my favorite quotes is, what you know has gotten you to where you are today. And if you want to get to another level, you probably are going to have to learn something new. And the other part of it too is you're going to feel really, really good about yourself when you feel like a competent human being who can add value to any conversation, who can communicate at a deep level, who can fix things, who can have deep conversations. I just think it's an important facet for human beings to be working on themselves forever, because you'll take pride in that when you work on yourself.
And Kevin, I think I heard a powerful insight there. You mentioned about when you improve, when you get better, you feel better, you feel good about yourself. And it perhaps to me that feeling good about yourself is those little accomplishments that you make every day, every week, every year.
I grew up with very low self-worth, George, and I always wondered why. And I think a lot of the reason behind that was I wasn't willing to try new things. And I wasn't willing to prove to myself that I actually was more capable than I gave myself credit for. And by doing that, I actually kept lowering my worth, lowering my worth, lowering my worth. So when you do things that maybe you didn't believe were possible, when you learn something that helps you understand yourself at a deeper level, I think you can start to value yourself internally at the appropriate level. And I think it takes self-awareness, which is going to take learning ultimately. Yeah.
And you said you lowered your self-worth, your self-esteem, and it sounds like at one point you lowered it so much that you even thought, well, what's the point of living anymore? I'm not worth anything. How did you escape from that prison?
I think that for me, I had found quote unquote success. So I was a six-figure earner at 26. And I remember when I opened my final pay stub, I said, why aren't I happier than I am? This is exactly what I wanted. I have everything I could ever want. What's going on here? So I think I got all this awareness at once about what true happiness, quote unquote, and success was. Now, luckily, I had a very supportive group of people around me. So the day that I felt the worst, the day that I was having these suicidal thoughts, I texted somebody close to me and I said, hey, I'm having these thoughts, I'm having these feelings, I'm having these emotions. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do. And I think two things happened. One, I was in enough pain to reach out to somebody. Two, the person I reached out to gave me permission to make a different choice that day. He said, well, so much has changed, Kev, for you, but your environments are the same. Of course, you don't feel valued. You're hanging out in places where you're not valued. And if you were hanging out where you should be hanging out, you would be valued and you'd feel more valuable and your self-worth would be higher. But if I reached out to somebody, George, and I said, hey, I'm feeling a certain way, I don't know what to do. And they said, well, Kev, nobody likes their job. Everybody hates their job. That's par for the course. Then what are the odds I would have felt safe enough, courageous enough, and supported enough to actually leave? So in a weird way, Alan is the person I reached out to. His intended message was, you should really do what's going to make you the most happy and fulfilled. And he gave me the permission to do that, which I know a lot of people wouldn't necessarily have in that situation.
And why do you think you needed permission, or people need permission? Do we create traps for ourselves? Do we say, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I trained for, or this is what they hired me to do. I guess I better just keep doing it. And people expect me to do this.
Yeah, I think it's one of those scenarios where very, very rarely when we're growing up, and at least this was my experience, I didn't really see a lot of people living their dreams. I didn't see a lot of people who were truly, truly fulfilled in amazing relationships, loving their jobs, financially free, healthy. That wasn't something I experienced. So you have to understand that when you're pinging ideas off of people, people are giving you their limiting beliefs. People are giving you pieces of their trauma. They're giving you their expectations. So yeah, I think we do create traps for ourselves, but I think our communities also can hold us back in unintentional ways, just based on the fact that if I don't know anything about podcasting, George, and you ask me about podcasting, I can't add any value to your life. And I think a lot of us are going to people for advice that can't necessarily deliver value. And we just take their advice because we think they know better, or we're afraid to say no. So yeah, I do believe we back ourselves into corners, and I definitely did that. But I also believe that there are people in their own corners that we're trying to get advice from that we probably shouldn't take advice from, as frank and transparent as that may sound.
And so how do we know, Because we only know what we think we know, and we see the world from our perspective. How do we know that our world is too small?
Unfortunately, I don't know if we do. I don't know that we really recognize that until some sort of necessity comes along. I believe that humans require necessity to change. Nobody, you said it yourself, George. You ran marathons. You ran marathons. So imagine saying one day, I'm going to run 26 miles and then not telling anybody, not signing up for a marathon, not getting your bib, not raising money if you had to do that, versus doing all that. The necessity of having people say, hey, George, good luck. Hey, George, you still doing that marathon? The necessity of that will make you do things that you wouldn't necessarily do otherwise. So I think that for many people, it does require some sort of pain, some sort of trauma for you to take a step back and say, oh, you know what? I'm living by accident every day, and I'm not paying attention to the things I actually want to do because I'm focused on the things that I need to do. Was it something for you, George, that made you run? Or did you just decide one day, I want to run a marathon?
Yeah, and a good question. In high school, I was on the cross country team. And it's funny how things happen in life. How I got there is because I wanted to become popular with the girls, and I thought the way to do that would be to join the football team. Well, I went to try out for junior football, and at the first practice, the coach called me over and said, hey, son, the track team needs good men like you. I looked at him and said, oh, I just been cut my first practice. And so I went to the track team, and I wasn't good at anything in the track team, but I ended up going to the cross country team because they accepted anybody. And so I ran around with this group of skinny looking, lanky, goofy looking guys. We ran around the school, ran around the blocks. And I remember our first race was a 6-mile race, and I dropped out of it. And however, throughout my life, I continued to run off and on over the years. And after about, here's the interesting part, after about 20 years, I'm finally saying to myself, George, you've been telling yourself you're going to run a marathon. When are you going to do it?
Yeah.
And I finally made the commitment and started to train, learned how to train to run longer distances, and I finally did it. And I can tell you, it was painful. both physically and emotionally. Yeah. Because the whole time you're running that race, you're having this conversation with yourself saying, oh man, this hurts. Why you keep doing this? Look at everyone else looks better than you. Until you cross the finish line, and then the voice says, see, I told you you could do it. I told you you could do it. Let's do another one. Once you cross the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Kevin, I know that you used to be a bodybuilder, and I got to imagine that you're used to pain, because that's got to be a lot of pain and boring, because I remember going to the gym and trying, to do some of the exercise with the equipment there, and I thought, this is the most boring thing ever. And yet you managed to get through that. What kept you going?
I don't really know. I made a commitment. I made a public commitment, and I had public accountability, and I told all my friends and my family that I was going to do a bodybuilding show. And I think also I believed it was aligned for me. I had been working out. So I did my first show, I think when I was probably 25. So at that time I'd been working out for probably 9 years consistently. So I loved it. I loved fitness. I loved going to the gym. I loved all that. I did not enjoy the dieting. The dieting was absolutely terrible, and eating the same thing every day was challenging. But I assumed, and I think this is kind of a through line for my life, George, I assumed the result would make me happier than it did. I won the show I did. And I remember thinking I got 3 plastic trophies, and I just traded in 3 months of my life and who knows what else. So I ended up, to your point, afterwards, I said, I'm going to do another one. Now that I know what to expect and it's not so bad, I'm going to do another one. And I ended up dropping out maybe a month in. I had a pint of Ben and Jerry's in the freezer. I went down and ate that. I texted my coach and said, I am done, because I knew it no longer would be worth it. That is it for me. I'm very good at doing things that I know will be worth it. If I don't believe something will be worth it, I just kind of say, this is not for me. It's not in alignment anymore.
How do you measure worth it?
It's hard. It's really hard, because for many of us, we're imagining what it will be like in the future. So this is what I would say. You have to understand the difference between the results-driven happiness and the process-driven fulfillment. So this is always my analogy. If this podcast goes well, George, if your intended message goes well and I don't mess this up horribly, I will be happy. I will give myself a pat on the back and say, Kev, you're the man. No matter how this podcast goes, I am fulfilled doing it. I am in the process of fulfillment. So I know it'll be worth it because I'm fulfilled in the process, even if the process kind of sucks. I told you this, I love mixed martial arts. I love martial arts of all kinds. I was in the gym right before this doing 5-minute rounds on the heavy bag. That sucks. It's terrible. You can't breathe. You're sweating in your eyes, but I'm so fulfilled in the process and after. So I think number one, it's you can reflect on times you've done it before, but you have to ask yourself, am I hoping for a certain result, or do I actually feel fulfilled by the process that I am doing right now? I think that's one of the best ways to tell whether it's worth it or not.
The process must feel fulfilling is what I'm hearing.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's not enough just to be results driven.
No, because if you're results driven and you don't get the results, which you'll never do right away, then you're just going to quit and go on to something else. A lot of people say, how did you guys get to 1,000 episodes? And I appreciate that. I'm very grateful for that compliment, because although it sucked and I was broke and I couldn't pay the bills and there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes, I always loved this part. I love being able to talk into the microphone with people, and I can't believe I get to do it for a living now. It blows my mind. But in the beginning, I started this to have an impact. I did not start this for money. I did not start this for fame. I didn't start this to be interviewed. I started this based on helping other people. While I could not make a single dollar within the first couple of years, I could help a lot of people. And that's a good result. Impact is a good result, and you can get results based on that. But if you're only looking at the results, it's going to be very hard to continue going because you get very little results in the beginning. It's just the way it works.
And yet business today is focused on results. And if you come to work for my company, I expect results pretty soon. Maybe not the first week, but the first quarter for sure. I want to see results from you. So what advice do you give to leaders on the messages they should be sending to the people who work for them, who they expect results from, but they might be killing them trying to get the results?
I believe that if you can communicate the fact that I want you, and this is new age and it's very rare, but I want you to be as happy while you're here as you are when you're home. I want you to not only get results for the company, I want you to improve your own life's results. I don't want you to work here at the detriment of your own personal life. I think that what's happening, and I think something unique is going to shift in the future, where your job should add as much value to you as you add to it, not just monetarily. I'm talking about helping you understand yourself at a deeper level. I'm talking about making sure that you understand finance, you understand health, you understand relationships. Imagine if your job helped you become a more competent, capable, happy, fulfilled human being. How much better would you be at your job? And it goes back and forth. And that's why I think you have to lead by example. A lot of leaders are saying, I need you to get blank results, blank results, blank results, blank results, but they don't have any of the results that the people working with them look up to. They're not necessarily walking their talk. They're talking about it, but are they actually living that way? I think that's the way to do it, is to say, look, yes, it's important to get result A, result B. It's important to hit these numbers. It's important to measure these KPIs, but it's also important to make sure that this person's life is getting better outside of work. Because if it's getting better outside of work, ultimately they'll be able to help the business more. I just believe that when you're a fuller cup, you can pour more. And I don't think a lot of people understand the synchronicity of how that works long-term with somebody.
And Kevin, I think that's worth repeating. When you're a full cup, you can pour more. When you're a drain cup, you've got nothing to give.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a conversation with my business partner, and yes, we're the officers, but it's the thought, it's the fundamental. I said, hey, I'm looking to buy a new bed. It's going to be like $5,000 for my wife and I. And he said, will it help you sleep better? I said, yes. He said, do it, because you'll be more productive and ultimately you'll be able to bring more money, more impact, and more mastery back into the business. So and again, I understand not every person working at a company is going to be able to do that, but just that fundamental of understanding, if I say, no, I know you have a family event coming up, but you can't do it. That's not helping. That's not necessarily helping. In this moment, maybe they stay and work, but it's a negative bid. It's going to hurt the relationship, and ultimately it's going to hurt the way they look at the company. And there's levels, there's depths that I don't think a lot of people are looking at.
How do you believe leaders can better lead by example?
Show people what they're doing. I think a lot of us we kind of segment ourselves where it's like, these are the people who are doing this and I'm the person up here. I believe if you have a more transparent view of your business, of what are you doing? What's on your calendar? What habits are you doing every single day? Everybody on our team can see my calendar. Everybody on our team can see the 23 habits I track every day. They see the reports I get for my productivity. So I think it's understanding maybe I'm higher up, quote unquote, in the business, but it doesn't mean I'm not doing the same things as you. It doesn't mean I won't do the things that you're doing if you need to take time off. That level of transparency, I believe, is the best way to lead through example, because people can actually see what you're doing. And there's not this imaginary wall between you and I. I think that's important. And I think that's the way business is going, really.
And Kevin, I'm hearing something I think profound and quite unusual. And what I think you're saying is that, so if you are the leader of the organization and I work for you, naturally I've got to report to you on my KPIs, my results, and what you're saying is you also have a duty to let me know what you're doing.
Yeah.
What the hell do you get paid for, other than just sitting in that chair smoking that cigar?
Yeah, I think it's important to have. It has to be mutually beneficial, but I think there also has to be a level of checks and balances, because if not, that's when people start to lose respect. That's where people start to lose perspective. That's where you lose the team aspect, where some people are doing this, other people are doing this. Everybody's going to have different roles and responsibilities, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't know what other people are up to, especially the people who are telling you, hey, can you do this by this date? And I think the other thing too is owning your mistakes. That's one of the best ways to lead by example. We have a culture that we call fail forward. So when you make a mistake, understand I most likely have made the same mistake. It's not the end of the world. I'm way more focused on how we get up from the mistake than the mistake we made. And secondarily, I don't believe it's a mistake the first time. I mean, it's really like, that's okay. That's par for the course. If we make the same mistake over and over again, we're building a habit. But in the beginning, it's totally par for the course. Not only is it expected, it's welcomed, because it means you're learning something you didn't know before.
You've mentioned the word habit a few times.
Yes.
How important, how productive is that, and how negative can that be?
My goodness. Well, it's unreasonably productive because you're focusing in on what are the top 5 things that bring me the top 5 results I want, and how do I do more of those? And then you can reverse engineer based on that. So you're not getting lucky. But on the other side, it can get very negative and it can slow things down if you're not doing the right things, because what you do consistently will bring you results, whether they're the results you want or the results you don't want. So if I put $1 in my bank account every day over the course of 100 years, it'll add up. If I take $1 out of my bank account every day over the course of 100 years, it's going to add up. So yeah, it's this interesting thing where I think negative habits actually pay off worse than positive habits, because you're losing compound interest versus gaining it. So it's a weird thing. But yeah, I would say your habits are determining what you're going to have in 50 years, whether they're the right or the wrong. And if they're the wrong ones, you're going to see pretty quickly that you're losing momentum, and at least you'll have the opportunity to course correct. But your habits are the dictator of your future, right or wrong.
Habits, dictator of your future. That's a mantra worth repeating. Kevin, tell us about Next Level University. Who's it for, and what might people find there?
Next Level University is for dream chasers. It's a heart-driven but no BS approach to holistic self-improvement. That's all we talk about, how to get better at life, love, health, and wealth. And that is what you'll find. You'll hear conversations about ego. You'll hear conversations about finances, speaking, everything in between, really. So if you're a dream chaser who wants more out of life, that's what we're all about. And we do 7 episodes a week. So that way you can get a little better every single day, talking about habits and consistency, George, like we talked about already.
And 7 days a week, that is definitely a strong habit.
Yes.
And people can find the link to Next Level University in the description below. Kevin, as we prepare to wrap up, if you could offer 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice to a leader on how they can encourage their team to develop and practice more positive habits.
Oh, man. One, I would say understand the upside of making relatability a habit. That would be one thing I would say is when you strengthen the relationship between you and somebody else, you also strengthen the opportunity. I think, again, we're often talking about, I want you to do blank, 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 and blank, when if you build a relationship with that person, they'll ask you how to do better. That's number one. Number two, understand that people have lives outside of the organization, and they're always going to have lives outside of the organization. And if you can help them improve their lives outside of the organization, I promise they will help you improve the organization from within. And don't forget, at the end of the day, nobody's as good as they say. Nobody's as bad as they say. You usually fall somewhere in between. So don't let leadership get to your head, and make sure you stay humble, because that's probably how you got there in the first place.
My guest today is Kevin Palmieri, reminding you that your job should add as much value to you as you add to the organization. If you like what you heard, remember to like, comment, and share this podcast. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.